Are you wondering why the world's most powerful democracy often seems to be in a state of constant chaos? Could it be that Uncle Sam's family reunion resembles a never-ending food fight? We're talking mashed potatoes on the chandelier kind of chaos. The kind that makes you wonder, who's really running this show? It's like the world's big brother is always getting into some kind of trouble. It's time we dive deeper into this political quagmire. Let's unpack the naughty world of US politics. Ever been to a party where you only had two options for food? Sounds limiting, right? Welcome to the US political system. Now imagine you're at this party. You're hungry, but all you can choose from is two flavors of pie. You're not particularly fond of either, but hey, you gotta eat, right? This, my friends, is American politics, where the menu is dominated by a duopoly, the Democrats and the Republicans. Let's take a stroll down history lane. The Founding Fathers, in their infinite wisdom, didn't specify a number of political parties in the Constitution. But 2 centuries later, we're stuck in a political tango where only 2 dancers get to strut their stuff on the floor. It's like a never-ending boxing match, where the gloves are red and blue and the ring is the whole country. And what about the third-party candidates, you ask? Well, they're like that distant cousin who shows up at the family reunion, but always ends up sitting at the kids' table. Since the Civil War, only one third-party candidate, Teddy Roosevelt in 1912, has managed to come second place. All the others? They've either ended up as footnotes in history or spoilers in the main event. So, what does this two-party dominance mean for political discourse? Well, imagine trying to paint a masterpiece using only 2 colors. Sure, you might create something interesting, but think of all the shades and nuances you're missing out on. This system reduces complex issues into simple binary choices, like choosing between spaghetti and chili. It's a tug-of-war where the rope is policy, and the loser is often compromise and nuanced discussion. But hey, who needs a smorgasbord of options when you can simplify everything into a this or that choice, right? After all, we live in a world of unlimited choices, from coffee flavors to streaming services. But when it comes to choosing our leaders, we're stuck with a 2-item menu. So, with only 2 dominating voices, where does that leave the rest of the choir? Who said money can't buy happiness? In US politics, it can certainly buy influence. Ah, money. The universal language of persuasion. In the world of US politics, it's not just about the Benjamins, it's about the billions. Yes, you heard right. Billions. This isn't just an expensive game of Monopoly, it's a high-stakes poker match, where the chips are the voters' trust and the future of the nation. Let's talk about lobbying, the art of persuading politicians to see things your way. It's a significant industry in the US, with over $3 billion spent annually. That's billion with a B, folks. And what's the return on this hefty investment, you ask? Well, it's policies and laws that often cater more to those with the deepest pockets rather than the average Joe and Jane. But lobbying isn't the only way money talks in US politics. Enter campaign financing. A single election cycle can cost upwards of a whopping $7 billion. That's more than the GDP of some small countries. This is where corporations, wealthy individuals, and special interest groups flex their financial muscles to ensure their preferred candidate gets the limelight. Now, you might be wondering, how does this massive influx of money affect policy decisions? Well, let's just say it's not a coincidence that the interests of the wealthy and corporations often seem to align perfectly with new laws and regulations. The game is rigged, my friends, and the house always wins. So we've got lobbying and campaign financing, 2 sides of the same tarnished coin. And you know what they say about coins, right? They're made to be spent. In this case, they're spent on buying influence, shaping policies, and steering the course of the nation. Apparently, in the land of the free, the size of your wallet can determine the volume of your voice. So, next time you think about the state of US politics, remember this. It's not just a game of chess, it's a game of Monopoly, and the player with the most cash is holding all the cards. Ever heard of Picasso or Van Gogh? Well, politicians are artists too, especially when it comes to drawing district lines. Now let's dive into a concept as intriguing as it sounds: gerrymandering. It's the grand old tradition of politicians sculpting and shaping voting districts to their advantage. Think of it as the political equivalent of home field advantage. The term itself was coined way back in the 19th century when Massachusetts Governor Elbridge Gerry signed a bill that redistricted the state to benefit his party. The shape of one of these districts was likened to a salamander, thus birthing the term gerrymander. But how does gerrymandering impact election results, you ask? Well, imagine you're a politician. You've got a state with 100 voters, 50 of whom lean towards your party and 50 who don't. Now, instead of splitting the state into 2 districts, each with a fair mix of voters, you get creative. You draw lines so that your party's voters are majority in more districts. Voila! You've just gerrymandered your way to victory. Let's color this with some numbers. Over the past few decades, gerrymandering has tipped the scales in numerous elections. In 2010, for example, one party won fewer than half of the total votes in some states, but still managed to secure over 2/3 of the seats. If that doesn't sound like democracy, I don't know what does. And the cherry on top? This isn't illegal. In fact, it's been happening right under our noses for centuries. So, next time you see an oddly shaped voting district that looks more like a Picasso painting than a geographical area, remember, it's not just a map, it's a masterpiece of political artistry. Now, we've got to give credit where credit's due. These politicians could have had stellar careers as abstract artists. Maybe they missed their calling after all. They've been creating some outlandishly creative shapes with voting districts. And you thought your child's scribbles were just random. Imagine being invited to a party, but then being told you can't dance. Welcome to the dark side of US elections. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, or should I say the invisible puppeteer in the polling booth, voter suppression. Picture this, the land of the free, the beacon of democracy, where every voice matters. Unless, of course, you're in the wrong zip code or can't afford an ID, or can't make it to the polls because, hey, some of us have jobs. Take, for instance, Georgia's exact match law. This law requires that voter registration information matches exactly with the information in government databases. If your middle initial is missing, or there's a minor typo, you're out. Seems fair, right? Well, not quite. Over 53,000 voter registration applications were held in limbo during the 2018 elections, and surprise, surprise, a staggering 70% of those were from African Americans. Now, if you think that's just a coincidence, let me introduce you to North Dakota's voter ID law. This law requires a residential address on the ID to vote, which sounds reasonable until you realize that many Native Americans, who happen to lean Democratic, use P.O. boxes instead of residential addresses. And let's not forget about the reduction of polling places in minority communities, the purging of voter rolls, and the imposition of strict voter ID laws. All these tactics have one thing in common. They disproportionately affect minority voters, the elderly, the poor, and the young. You see, in the land of the free, some are freer than others. If you're a minority, or you're poor, or you're young, you might find the door to the polling booth inexplicably slammed in your face. Did you know that a study by the Brennan Center for Justice found that 14 states had new voting restrictions in place for the 2016 presidential election? And these states, my friends, accounted for 184 electoral votes, or 68% of the total needed to win. So, who's really pulling the strings on election day? After all this, you might be asking, is there a way out of this political maze? Well, my dear friends, the answer is a resounding yes. Let's take a moment to revisit the political dance we've been twirling in. We've talked about the two-party system that often feels more like a ping-pong match, the money game where the highest bidder often wins, the artistry of election winning that sometimes resembles a circus act, and the unseen hand that puppeteers our political landscape. Now, let's talk solutions. One possibility, shaking up the two-party system, introducing more voices into the mix. Imagine a political landscape as diverse as our nation itself. Then there's the money game. Perhaps it's time we change the rules. Cap campaign donations, maybe? Make it a game of ideas, not dollars. As for the art of winning elections, how about we make it less about the spectacle and more about substance? And as for the unseen hand, transparency could be our greatest weapon. But remember, these solutions aren't magic bullets. They require effort, commitment, and most importantly, your participation. So let's not lose hope. Let's work towards a political landscape that truly represents us, the people. Remember, in a democracy, the power ultimately lies with the people. So the next time you're at the ballot box, remember you're not just voting, you're sculpting the future of your country.